Okay. Well, welcome everyone joining us from home, and thank you for those joining me in-house today. My name is Michelle Upton, and I am the owner of Healing with Grace, which is a small private practice. I do individual and couples counseling, but actually the profession that led me to chat with all of you in the community is my role in palliative medicine. I first want to just disclose that I am not a physician, so anything that we talk about in today's gathering or any future gatherings is really more just to serve as guidance and hopefully to be a safe space for all of you if you have questions, to at least get some initial information and then encouragement to go talk to your medical team. I am very grateful to be here. I've done this work for over 10 years in different capacities. I started in nursing facilities and rehabs, and then I worked for a hospice agency for a number of years, and then found my way in the hospital setting where I practice palliative medicine now. Um, I know that the topic of this discussion is difficult. Death and dying is the one certainty that we all have in common. And our culture sort of allows us to not talk about it as if maybe if we don't talk about it, it won't happen. And I know our logical brains know that that's not the case, but it's a very emotionally charged conversation. And so, again, I hope to offer comfort and confidence when we're exploring it. Um, I thought that maybe I could share a small story about what brought me to work in medicine and in this type of medicine. When I was in undergraduate school, I had to do an internship. It was a very brief internship, only a few hours, but I was able to navigate it so that I could follow my mom, who is a nurse and a social worker. And she was in a nursing facility at the time. And I had grown up going to nursing homes and short-term rehabs because any day off from school or half day, she would tag me and my brother along. So it was a very comfortable environment for us to be in. And one day, she asked me to observe a meeting that the social worker and the nurse were having with this young gentleman. He was probably, I would assume, in his mid-40s. And he was seated across the table from this nurse and the social worker, and they were sharing with him that his mother would be passing soon. And I was again kind of off to the side, and I saw his coloring change. His cheeks got flush, his voice got shaky, his eyes filled with tears. And all I wanted to do was jump out of that chair, run over to him, give him a hug, and say, "They're just kidding. Your mom's going to be fine. She'll live forever. You'll live forever." And I thought in that moment, I will never, ever work with individuals who have long-term or life-limiting illnesses because I just could never imagine having to deliver that kind of news. Well, clearly I am here today with all of you. So instead of avoiding that topic, I sort of dove right in. During my years in nursing facilities and in hospice and at the hospital, I ended up finding that there is so much dignity and intimacy and joy and love to be found in those stages of someone's life. And again, our culture doesn't do it justice. We shy away from it, which causes fear and sadness and hurt. And if we don't talk about it in time, it can also cause a lot of complicated grief for the loved ones that are left behind. And that is why on a random day, I started calling the Council on Aging and asking them if they would be open to having me come and talk about this with all of you. So here I am. That's sort of the introduction. My hope is to ask first those here and at home if there are any questions that you want to type into the text. I'm happy to start with your questions. And if no one is sure, then I am happy to sort of dive into some of the most common questions. Anything? Did you come with anything? That's okay. Well, I think the most important thing to cover is a form that I am even trying to make sure all of my own family members fill out, and that's called a healthcare proxy form. A healthcare proxy form is a form in Massachusetts where you have the right to tell your medical providers who you would trust to make decisions for you if there was a situation where you couldn't, whether it be a temporary circumstance or permanent. This is an example of what that form looks like, and I think actually I can pull it up on the computer. Here we go. So hopefully you're seeing this is the cover. And I'm just going to show those in the room. So what I'm doing, I'm scrolling through the instructions if you're following from home. And as you can see, the one in my hand looks a little bit different from the one on the screen, and that's okay. A lot of different agencies have formatted their own. They all remain a legal document. And what basically it is saying is you would say I in your name and who you choose. And who you choose is so important. So first, you want to choose someone that you trust, because if there was a situation where either cognitively or due to communication deficits, you were unable to tell your medical team what decisions you would make in certain situations, that could involve what medications you are wanting to take, what surgical procedures, what life-sustaining procedures. You need to trust that the people that you choose are going to follow through on what you would want. It gives you the option of identifying an alternative or a second healthcare agent. I wish it didn't say optional. I think that you really should be very thoughtful in making sure that you include 2 individuals on these forms. And that is for several reasons. One is it is often a lot easier if you have a partner in crime. Because if you are a healthcare agent named, that means that someone you love is going through something difficult and they're not able to communicate with you. And so it can be very helpful to have another person on this form that you can talk things out with. If a medical team has come to you with a question and you're needing to make a decision, it can be very helpful to have a support person sort of built in to this document. Another reason to have an alternate is because oftentimes the first person we choose is a spouse or a sibling, someone in the same age group as we are. And so the chance that you might become unable to make your own medical decision is usually mirrored in that first person that you choose. And so if you elect a spouse and for some reason they are unable to serve, if you do not have an alternate, then you do not have someone who can automatically make decisions for you. And so oftentimes the alternate might become a child or a neighbor or a friend. These are free forms that you can download on the internet. You can go to mass.gov. The one that's pulled up on the screen right now is massmed.org, massmed.org. And you can print this, and the only thing required for it to be a legal document is to have 2 witnesses on the bottom. And the only rules about these 2 witnesses are, one, that they're 18 years and older, and they also cannot also be serving as your proxy or your healthcare agent. So if I was going to appoint my husband and my son cannot witness it. It would have to be 2 other individuals. But these witnesses do not have to be attorneys. They do not need to be your medical team. It could be 2 friends, 2 other children that maybe you didn't appoint, 2 neighbors, whomever. You can also find these forms at any primary care facility, doctor's offices, hospitals, places like that. And once it's complete, I would strongly encourage you to hold on to the original, but give a copy to each of the individuals that you identify as your healthcare agent, as well as to your primary care doctor and any other provider that you're seeing on a regular basis. So if you have a cardiologist, a neurologist, if you're someone that's getting your blood work done a lot and you go to a lab, you can give any of those locations a copy of this and they can add it to your medical record. Any questions on that? Okay. The next form that I'm going to pull up, which is a little bit more involved, is called the MOLST form. So right now, it's the Massachusetts Medical Order of Life-Sustaining Treatment, and it is printed on this obnoxiously neon pink form, and this is what it will look like no matter where you go in Massachusetts. It's bright pink so that it is easily identifiable. Again, right now we use the MOLST, which is specific to Massachusetts. There is a movement that we are going to be transitioning sometime in the near future to what's called a POLST, so P-O-L-S-T. And so instead of the M meaning medical, order of life-sustaining treatment, the P is portable. Both of these forms follow you wherever you are, and copies are just as valid as the original form. And the reason I say that these are more involved is because this form really tries to direct your medical team around life-sustaining measures. This is a conversation that I have with families on a regular basis in the work that I do. And unfortunately, when I am having them, it is because they have a loved one in the ICU or a loved one in the end stage of one of a variety of chronic life-limiting illnesses, such as dementia, CHF, COPD, cancers. And it is a very difficult form to do when you're in that acute setting. It's a difficult form to do regardless, but what makes it easier is when you are the one filling it out, when it's not your family having to guess what you would have wanted, but rather your voice saying, yes, these things are acceptable to me. I do feel comfortable going through this type of treatment or this type of procedure. Or your voice saying, actually, I don't feel comfortable doing those things. Because without it, your medical team and your family, the people who love you the most, have to guess. And again, that's a big part of why I'm here. There are a lot of common myths around filling out these forms and around medical care. And because we're talking about life-limiting illnesses, it means that we're talking about death and dying at some point. Making these decisions doesn't mean that you are ever choosing to die. It never means that you are giving up. It never means that you are not a fighter. It's actually the opposite. You're having hope that you're going to have some kind of control about that very precious time in your life. And you are fighting for the right to have dignity at that time in your life. And you're empowering the people that you love and the people that are caring for you to make sure that they're doing exactly what you would have wanted. When I have individuals enter my care, I'll use COPD as the example. COPD is a chronic, life-limiting illness, right? It ultimately worsens and progresses over time, and the complications of that illness will lead to the end of someone's life that has that disease. And I could have two individuals come in the exact same stage of that illness. And one individual will look at me and say, I like the hospital. I think that they have good food. I get visitors all the time. I know that my needs are going to be met. I don't mind that I spend a lot of time coming back and forth here. I also don't mind short-term rehabs. I get to go. I've made some friends in those facilities. I'm okay with that. I don't mind blood work. I don't mind having to wear a breathing machine. All of that makes sense for me. And so I would say to that individual, okay, then let's keep doing what we're doing, right? And the medical team, the physician and the nurse practitioners and the physician assistants on that team would, of course, go through the risks and benefits of those choices. Well, if you want to use this medication, here are the risks. If you want to use this medical procedure, here are the risks and the benefits, right? And then I could have that other individual, like I said, same stage of life, same stage of illness, say to me, I don't like the hospital, and I don't like having to be away from my home and my family, and I don't like trying new medications. They upset my stomach. They make me feel tired. I want to know what it would be like if I didn't make all those same choices. Do I have the right to say no to treatment? Do I have the right to say, I want to be home? And how would that change my life? And how would that change my length of life? And I would look at that individual and say, okay, let's talk about that. Because even though both of these individuals, hypothetical, imaginary people, are coming to me with two totally different ideas of how they want to handle their COPD, neither of them is wrong. They have their own values, their own belief systems, their own resources and supports. And by talking to them and learning about them, myself, the medical community at large, can help guide them towards what decisions make the most sense to meet their goals, to respect their values. And this form is just one way to start doing that. Have I given too much information so far? Am I going too fast?
We'll get that.
So this is a MOLST, which should be carried wherever you can find the healthcare proxy. So again, your primary care doctor office should have it, hospitals should have it. I would be surprised if urgent cares didn't have it. Really, any medical provider should have these forms. You can also print them. Again, I believe the one I have up on here is under massmed.org. Oh, nope, I lied. So this form is under MOLST. So M is in Michelle, I'm biased, Michelle. O, L is in Larry, S is in Sam, T is in Tom, and then it's a dash, MA for Massachusetts.org. So MOLST-MA.org. This form does need to be completed with a physician. And that's because, of course, on this form, you're talking about life-sustaining treatment, which is medical interventions. And so you want to make sure that you're talking to someone who can answer your questions when it comes to these decisions. On here, I will just briefly review. What we're talking about are measures such as resuscitation, intubation, going to the hospital for care. And if you flip it over, you're going to see decisions about dialysis, artificial nutrition, artificial hydration. And then they have a spot that's blank in case there's other things that you would want to include or not include in your care, such as blood transfusions or receiving blood products of any kind. Again, I am not a physician, and so I'm not providing any medical advice, but I do want to dispel some of the myths around at least this first side of the form, which is talking about resuscitation, intubation, and hospital care. When you are first introduced to the idea of do not resuscitate, or DNR, a lot of individuals, if they don't do this for work, assume that that means do not treat and do not care for me any longer. It means that I've sort of accepted my fate. I know that I'm at the end of my life and I'm ready to pass. And that is just not a very good, clear understanding of what a do not resuscitate order means. When a medical professional is in a situation where they need to decide whether or not to use resuscitative measures, it only comes into play if the individual that they're caring for is not breathing on their own and they do not have a pulse, which means that their body has stopped working, which essentially means that they have passed. That is the only situation when a do not resuscitate would come into play. It does not mean do not treat. And what I mean by that is, if you have an irregular heart rhythm, if you're having difficulty breathing, you can have a do not resuscitate order and still be placed on a BiPAP machine, still receive medications to regulate your heart rhythm, to increase your blood pressure, to manage whatever the acute thing is that's happening. So it does not mean that we do not care for you or that your medical team doesn't care for you. It only means that if your heart stops beating naturally and on its own, do you want your medical team to try to reverse that? Or do you want them to acknowledge that your heart has stopped naturally and allow that end of life to occur? It is very similar with the idea of the intubation, which is the second option on this form. There is invasive and non-invasive intubation options, and so that is the difference between having a tube surgically placed into your trachea and down into your lungs versus having an external breathing machine such as a CPAP or a BiPAP, which is usually a mask that you wear over your mouth that is forcing oxygen into your lungs and helping your body mechanically breathe. And these can be in place together or not. So you can have a do not resuscitate and still request to be intubated if you're just having a respiratory issue. But most often they are performed together because if your body is in that much distress, if one of those organ systems fails, your heart or your lungs, the other is about to as well. It's going to start to struggle, and so most of the time these occur together. Okay? That last part, do not transfer to the hospital, I hope you can see at home and here. It does have in parentheses this exception to the rule, which is unless needed for comfort. We normally only select letter C, the third option, do not transfer to hospital, if you are at the final stage of your illness and you're utilizing comfort-focused care or hospice level care. And the reason that we would say, do not transfer me to the hospital in that situation is because we want all our care to be provided wherever we now call home, whether that means in your actual home, in a child's or family member's home, in a nursing facility, or in a hospice facility. So in those situations, because the expectation is if there's a symptom or a new need, the nursing staff from hospice would be coming directly to you, so you don't have to call 911 and go find care at the hospital or the emergency room. You can avoid that process and have them come to you instead. But one of the questions I get very often is, but what if I can't get comfortable at home? What if I call hospice and they come and my symptoms are so out of control? What if I'm having a lot of shortness of breath? What if I fell and I'm worried that I broke something? Just because you check this box does not mean you can never, ever go back to the hospital. It is written right into it. It's unless needed for comfort, which means any type of comfort, physical comfort, emotional comfort. So if you're having anxiety because your breathing is feeling too out of control, then you can say, you know what, we tried to treat it at home, I want to go to the hospital. If you fall and you're worried, or your loved one has fallen and you're worried they might have broken something, then yes, you still go to the hospital. But the hope is to receive all your care wherever you want to be. Does that make sense? Was that too much information or too fast? Okay. Any questions online? No. Okay. So the next resource that I have, which I apologize, I did not print a copy to show everyone in here, but I can spin my handy dandy laptop around. So this is a pamphlet that you can print out. It's called Planning Ahead, What Are Your Choices? And it is found on massmed.org, which is the same website that I gave you for the healthcare proxy form. And I have no ownership. I don't know if I have to claim that this is not my form. This is a Massachusetts massmed.org form that they've created, but I think that it has a lot of wonderful language in it and a lot of wonderful resources. So part of what it talks about is palliative care. So palliative medicine is the type of work that I do. And another very common misunderstanding is that palliative medicine is the same as hospice care. Palliative medicine is kind of a broader umbrella. So when palliative medicine, becomes appropriate for you, or when you become eligible for that type of medicine, is truly at any point in a chronic illness. So you could have a palliative care provider as soon as you get diagnosed with a long-term chronic illness. As soon as you hear those abbreviations, CHF, chronic heart failure, COPD, right? Cancer, dementia. And then palliative medicine teams are able to follow you over the trajectory of that illness. When hospice comes into play under that umbrella is at the end stage of those chronic illnesses, so the last 6 months. And you would know that you were entering that stage of the illness, those last 6 months, by talking to your medical provider. And they would be looking at your symptoms and how you're doing and how treatment has or has not helped to be able to sort of give you that prognosis and that timeline. Palliative medicine is not available everywhere, but I think that our community is starting to really see the value in it. And so I think that we're seeing it pop up more. So you can ask for it when you're in your annual physical with your primary care doctor. You can say, look, I've been living with chronic heart failure for several years now. I feel like it's a little overwhelming to navigate all the different doctors. I have you, I have my cardiologist, I have a pulmonologist, and it's getting overwhelming. And sometimes I'm at home and I get this sudden new symptom and I'm not really sure how to handle it. Who can I call? And so they can make a referral for community-based palliative medicine. And if you do, or a loved one of yours ever winds up in a hospital, then you can ask them if they have a palliative care team right within the walls of the hospital that could come and meet with you and your family and hopefully answer any questions that you have. The primary goals of palliative care are symptom management and goals of care. They do lots of other things, but symptom management means trying to make you feel as good as they can within the context of whatever that underlying illness is. And feeling good doesn't just mean taking away shortness of breath if you have a respiratory disease. It doesn't just mean taking away the nausea if you're on chemotherapy. It really means making you feel physically as well and mobile as you can be, as well as emotionally as well as you can, easing those anxieties, addressing any of those uncertainties, and coming up with a plan to move forward that makes sense for you. What this form also shows, or this pamphlet I should say, is it gives some links to other very helpful websites that talks about aging and chronic long-term illnesses and what it could look like or feel like, and also kind of guiding you on how to have these conversations with the people that you love. My team often half jokes, although we sort of wish it was true, that people would show up to Thanksgiving dinner with these forms and talk to their loved ones about it around the table. As they pass the corn, they pass the mulch, they pass the turkey, they pass the healthcare proxy, because it is just so important. One of the nurse practitioners I work with, I told her that I was going to be taking her words because I just think that they're so helpful, and they, I think, just bring a little bit of a lightness to it. We do not get car insurance because we're hoping we're going to get in an accident and we're going to need to use it. That's not why we buy insurance. We buy insurance because, God forbid, we are in an accident. We have what we need. These forms and these conversations with your doctors and your family are like that insurance. We're not hoping that you end up with a chronic illness or that, that illness progresses faster than you were thinking. But we have them because if or when it happens, you have this insurance that your voice will still be heard even if you can't say these things yourself. And I think, if I haven't talked too much, that for today, the last thing I would want to share is the comfort that these forms can give to the people you love most. I am 38. I have a healthcare proxy. My husband and my family know what I would want. As far as I know, I'm healthy. I don't need to wait for an illness to make these choices. These forms are very fluid. You can change them at any time. What makes them valid is the most recently dated one. The most recent conversation that you've had is the one that is legally binding. And automatically, if you sign either one of these again, the others in the past are no longer valid. So I'm 38. My wishes might change when I'm 50, when I'm 60, 70, 80, 90, and beyond, right? The reason that I have one is because, God forbid, I was in a situation where my husband had to make choices for me. I don't want him to feel like yes to yes. I want him and my mother to feel confident that they're making decisions that I would make for myself. When that doesn't happen, that's when I probably do the most work on my medical team, right? These decisions and talking about medications and chemotherapy and dialysis and treatment, that's when the physicians I work with and nurse practitioners and physician assistants thrive. That is their bread and butter, and they're wonderful at it. As the social worker on the team, when these forms aren't done, that is when I do the most work, because it can rob family members and the individual, the patient, from so much. Because instead of feeling empowered and loving and like you're doing this wonderful thing in a difficult time for someone that you love dearly, you are instead filled with uncertainty, guilt, hurt, resentment, anger that you didn't have these conversations sooner. And if you and, say, a sibling have different ideas about what dad would have wanted, then sometimes you also lose that support and that relationship. And you're already planning on losing someone that you love. So it's like this very unfortunate ripple effect. When these forms are completed, even if it's hard to put them into action, even if you're, of course, still grieving someone that you know you're going to lose, it brings you closer to them and to anyone else in your family, because you can feel with certainty that you are doing the right thing by them. So I cannot overstate enough. Again, I mean, Thanksgiving's kind of far away. So maybe 4th of July cookouts, barbecues can be 4th of July barbecues with most in healthcare proxy forms, which, as I said, you can print for free. Oh, you can leave that. Or visit your primary care provider or a local hospital and just ask them simply for a blank form so that you can review it and then talk about it when you're ready. Any questions on all of that? So I think the hope is that I will be coming back in June and in July, and I know the team here is going to put it out in their flyers. I hope to talk maybe, again, if you have questions or if you send in questions between now and then, I will definitely spend time trying to answer them. If not, then I will probably go off the cuff and drive it myself. Maybe spend some time talking about dementia, some of the most common types of dementia, what it can feel like as the person living with dementia, as well as being the caregiver for those living with dementia. I think it could also be helpful to maybe talk about the different types of care that you can get and where, regardless of illness or age. Sometimes we know as we get older, we just need more help, right? Although our mind is just as wise and sharp, our bodies sort of sabotage us. They're not always up for doing what we want them to do. And so we need to look at where it makes most sense to spend our time. Is that within our own home? Is that in an assisted living? Is that in a senior community? There's so many options. And if you are living with an illness, or you do have a parent or a spouse living with some kind of chronic illness, are we looking at the differences between assisted livings, independent living, nursing homes, short-term rehabs? We could spend some time talking about that. If there are no other questions, and I haven't scared everyone away, you are always welcome to email me. I don't know if that's allowed. Is that allowed? Can they email me? So my email is Michelle, MICHELLE, at uptoncounseling.com, which is all one word. Upton is my last name. U as in umbrella, P as in Peter, T as in Tom, O, N as in Nancy. So Michelle at uptoncounseling.com. you can send in your questions, and I can try to bring answers to them to this next meeting in June. Or, of course, reach out to the Fairhaven Council on Aging, and I'm sure they'll be happy to forward me those questions so that we can talk. And that's really it. I just appreciate you joining me.